Hello, and welcome to another one of our mental health chats. Today, the BISD licensed counselors will be talking to you about how to talk to your teen about mental health. Sometimes it's just hard to get the conversation started and know what to say, and so we wanted to present you with some pointers and some tips and encourage you to make the effort to try to talk with your teen. My name is Lauren Albert, and I am the LPC at Brazosport High School. And a little bit later, you will hear from Sarah Eddy and Paige Potts, and both of them work at Brazos Wood High School. One of the first tasks that you can do in talking with your youth about mental health is just let them know what you have noticed. Let them see that you are noticing that things may be different, their interactions may have changed, maybe a change in mood or behavior or activities that they participate in, and just let them know that you see these things, you notice, and let them have a conversation about what they're experiencing as well. And also remember that we all process things in various ways. And so crying does not always mean a crisis. Sometimes they're just releasing the emotion and it comes out in the form of tears. Sometimes it comes out as anger, and that's okay. We just want to work on how we manage that anger and maybe what are some of the other emotions underneath what's making them angry. And also their behavior has a message. So help them identify what they're trying to say, or maybe things that you recognize and that you have noticed and in their behavior. Another key tip that we have is to normalize but don't minimize. We want to help them identify the emotions that they may be experiencing, help them find vocabulary to describe what they're experiencing, and just help them be safe in the conversation with you. We want to make sure that they are learning the different emotions, the varying levels of the emotions, and maybe the complexity of having multiple emotions at one time. Some minimizing techniques that we want to stay away from would be saying things like, you shouldn't feel this way, or get over it, or other people have bigger issues. We know that may be true, but it minimizes their feelings in the moment and it kind of shuts down any conversation that may take place. We also want to encourage you to process the situation or event. Sometimes their choices may be hurtful, or the decisions they make may create some tension in the family or in the relationship. But just be clear that you're upset about the situation or the event and not them as a person, and help them really know that there is a distinguished difference between those two. We want to use this as an opportunity to talk about your family values or goals for the future, or morals or things that you hope for them, because this is a time to let them know that feelings are okay and they could be valid and they can be helpful and supported through their processing of the emotions. So one of the examples that we like to provide is that, maybe your teenager has found the love of their life that they met at lunch on Monday, don't know their last name, don't know their birthday, don't know what they want to do in the future, but this is the love of their life. And then by Friday, they've broken up and it's just devastating. So yes, they had all of those feelings and they may have felt all of those feelings through the week, and we can validate and support them and encourage them and walk through this situation with them, but also teaching them life skills and important ways to manage their emotions as they navigate some of the hard times in life. So what's the buzz, right? What's this all about? Well, we want you to be aware, be genuine, be quiet, and be an advocate. So being aware means to acknowledge your own fears, know the things that may trigger you, notice how you feel, and sometimes that's a great conversation to have with your youth as well, because it lets them know that these are real and valid feelings that occur throughout life, and here's a proper way to handle it and walk through it and lean on others during that situation. Be genuine. You don't have to have all the right words. You don't have to know what to say. And sometimes it's okay to say, man, this is tough. I'm not sure what we should do. Let's think about it together, or whatever the situation may be. Just be genuine and be real and be your amazing, authentic self. Silence is golden. Sometimes being quiet and allowing them to process things, allowing the space to just be there for everybody to have a moment of thinking, will provide clarity and may also provide a way for the conversation to move in the direction that is most helpful for the youth. And be an advocate. Don't be afraid to help them find help or find hope, or to know that they're not alone and that they can get the support they need. And it's starting with you, and that's an amazing thing for them to have. As our teens are walking through the challenges that adolescents bring them, they oftentimes will watch what adults in their world do and model that same behavior, or learn from that and say that's what they don't want to do as they get older. How you process life situations will be seen by them and often opens the doors for conversations that you can have with them. We don't always get it right as adults, and sometimes we mess up, but sometimes we have walked through similar situations and we can offer advice and wisdom to help them as they navigate their journey. So some of the things that we encourage you to kind of model for them and reflect back to them is the tone and volume and how you talk with them, how you use your voice, and when you advocate for them. How do you manage stress? How do you help them manage stress? What are we showing at home? What are we showing in the workplace or at school? What are some common self-care practices that you have? Do you encourage them to have self-care practices? Is it something that we want them to have but we don't do? And then that makes it difficult for them to see the importance of doing that. So we want to make sure that we're all on the same page and we're modeling that behavior. Do you limit distractions and encourage them to limit it as well? Sometimes we have to put boundaries around the things that we let into our mind, whether that be turn off the phone or turn off the TV or step away from social media for a little bit, just so we can have some clear thoughts and some space in our mind. And so we want to model that behavior as well. Be curious and ask questions. Let them know you're interested. Have them ask questions too, things that they're wondering about or concerns that they have. Talk about successes and growth opportunities. What went well? What project did you work on that you were able to accomplish? Where did you learn that you messed up and you needed to make some changes? How did you get through those situations? Just let them know that sometimes life may be tough, but they can get through hard times and they have support. We encourage you to create an environment where we talk about physical and mental health as one and the same. We want to make it as easy to talk about mental health issues as we do about medical issues. And so sometimes that's as easy as asking, how are you feeling? How long have you been feeling this way? What have you tried? What has worked in the past? What helps you get through? Just like you would if you were asking about a cold or some allergies or maybe a sore finger or maybe any other kind of medical issue they may be having. If we create an environment that is as open to talk about mental health as it is medical issues, then we're going to be able to help them navigate through their emotions and things that they may be working through.
Thank you, Mrs. Albert. This is Mrs. Eddy, and I want to kind of have a little metaphor for what parenting is like many times with our teenagers. So I'm going to talk about the sea otter, the porcupine, and the goat. So these sea otters are little creatures that, if you know anything about sea otters, sometimes they will float in packs at night, and when they sleep, they'll hold hands so that they don't lose anybody in the family. Then we have our porcupine, which is our lovely teenager. And finally, we have the goat, which is the greatest of all time. This is kind of where I saw myself for many years and where I see other parents struggle. We're trying so hard to manage everything and to be an amazing parent, but this can often lead to defensiveness in our children and in ourselves, which leads to disconnection. So how do we get more present with our student? How do we move towards that porcupine when all those spikes are coming out? This is tough because listening and being present with our teen challenges us, and it requires us as caregivers to contain our reactions many times. We want to be able to give you all some resources. If you don't already, one great way to start is a family value shield, where you just kind of put down all the things that you value as a family. Of course, everybody gets input with this so that there's buy-in. Does it always work? Of course not, but it's a starting point and it's something to be able to refer back to, that this is for your family what you value and what you all have agreed upon. Next is a container activity. This is a video where a therapist will kind of walk you through how to contain some really heavy emotions that you may be feeling. We know as parents, many times our work or things that we've struggled with in the past might come out when certain buttons are pushed with our children and loved ones. So hopefully this container activity will be something that will be a resource when you're having those hard conversations. The last one that I am including at the end is an empathy versus sympathy video for parenting. And it actually wasn't created for parenting. It's by Brene Brown. If you haven't seen it, it is fantastic. And it really just shows how to be with somebody that you love, whether that's your student or somebody else. But it really puts you kind of back in the sea otter mode where you are a trainer as opposed to a manager over here with the goat, so that we can really connect with this porcupine. So let's see what's going on with this porcupine, our teenagers. All right. So we know in education and as parents that correction requires connection. The more we're connected to our student or our child, the more they are going to hear what we have to say. So what we're seeing many times, though, from the porcupines is what's above the iceberg. This comes from door slamming, school refusal, swearing, and sometimes even physical things like headaches, stomach aches, disrespect, and increased screen time. But what we know with many teenagers, what they're really experiencing kind of below this iceberg tip is worry, boredom, pressure, helplessness, not being able to regulate themselves, a lack of connection to others, fears about social status, all these things that when we're teenagers, we just don't have the answers for, and we don't have the prefrontal functioning to be able to figure some of these out. And Ms. Potts is going to talk about that a little bit more later in the presentation. But for now, we want to talk about some very specific ways that you can start some conversations about mental health with your teen. So one that I really like is what is taking space up in your mind right now. It's a little bit different than just the how are you feeling or how did your day go. Next, we want to look at keeping the conversation going. And this is more about validating, kind of reminding them we're in this together, you're not alone, you're enough just the way you are. This can be really difficult. So it's not saying that we necessarily understand what they're going through, but that we are with them in this process. Also, in our attempts to normalize talking about mental health with your student, we wanted to show you what the top issues have been that we have addressed in the schools as licensed professional counselors. So anxiety always comes up as one of our top reasons that students come to our office. Healthy relationships, this could be anything from friendships, relationships with a significant other, parents, teachers, coworkers, coping skills. And I love, if you have not yet seen the movie Inside Out, they have done a fantastic job of telling us and describing what some of the things that the students most deal with. So down here, I actually got some of the characters. The first one is named Ennui, and that stands for that kind of listlessness, that boredom, that student that is just not motivated. We have envy over here, that's just jealous, comparing themselves to everybody. We have embarrassment, which we see so many times with our teens. They just don't feel like they fit in, something, socially awkward. Of course, this guy is anger, which we see sometimes comes out when other things are not being addressed. And of course, how could we forget anxiety? And like I said, if you have not seen this movie, it's fantastic. They even hired a psychologist to kind of help with some of these roles and what they really look like. And the depiction of the panic attack is spot on. So if you have not seen this, it is just a great movie when we're talking about emotions and teens. Also, stress management, which is very common. There's lots of transitions that they're going through. And then also grief and loss is something that we address. And we do offer groups to help process losses that students have had. All right, so The big conflict in adolescence. So this is a time where students are trying to figure out identity versus role confusion. And this is off of Erikson's work, which if you've ever taken a psychology class, you're probably very familiar with this. This is kind of like Psychology 101. But what we want to kind of emphasize is it's so important that they're discovering their place in the world right now, because if they don't, many times this can lead to mental health problems when they're older. So if they don't figure it out now, this can lead to problems as adults. So I want to talk to you a little bit more about this identity versus role confusion. And the big question at this stage is, who am I? There's so many ways that we can support our student. And I really like the work done by Crystal Collier. She talks about several things that you can do as a parent to build this talk, trust, deal, and feel. So she's very conscious that we have to talk about these things. They're tough things to talk about. And when your student starts arguing with you, sometimes I say, that's great. That means that's where they're supposed to be. That's very normal. It's not comfortable. We don't like it, but it's normal. They're looking for this sense of belonging, trying to understand their values and beliefs and ambitions, as opposed to doubting who they are, doubting that they belong anywhere, feeling like they don't have an identity, which can often lead to lack of direction, anxiety, and depression. Many times they will get this through social relationships. And we also want to address how their brain is developing at this stage, which Ms. Potts is going to tell us about next.
Thank you, Ms. Eddy. My name is Ms. Potts, and I am a LPC at Brazos Wood High School. So now we're going to kind of shift gears and talk about something that lays the foundation for everything else that we've been talking about in this presentation, which is brain development. Brain development is extremely important when it comes to how, or the most appropriate way to approach your teen when talking about difficult or uncomfortable discussions. So your brain doesn't fully develop until you're about 25 years old. The part of the brain that's still developing is called your frontal lobe. Think of your frontal lobe as your thinker. So it's providing the brake. So when we have a impulse, it is allowing you to think through before acting on it. Your impulse control center is going to be your limbic system. Think of your limbic system as your accelerator. As we start to get older, we start building neural connections that allow us to put a brake on those impulses and truly think about the long-term consequences, planning things out, being able to follow through with those plans. So your teen's frontal lobe is not fully developed yet. So what does that mean for their actions and how, or the most appropriate way we are able to have these challenging conversations with them? So one of the first and most important things to understand when we are having these discussions with our teens is that we need to validate these emotions. So we're trying to build trust with them so they feel comfortable enough to open up to us. Discounting may lead to them withdrawing, not wanting to talk to you, and that could lead to a whole other set of issues. So you don't have to agree with the emotion that they're currently experiencing, but you do need to be able to say, yeah, you're having this emotion and it probably doesn't feel very good, but I'm here for you to open up and to listen to, or so I can listen to you. They're going to have that emotion whether or not you validate it. And validating it is, again, going to allow you to build that trusting relationship with them. So what the next and one of the most important things to help your teen do is identify what emotion they're actually feeling. So a lot of times what we do is we tend to just identify, and when I say we, I mean teens and just people in general, tend to only identify what I like to call umbrella emotions. So umbrella emotions are going to be things like anger, sadness, excited, happy. While that is true, those are emotions that we're feeling, there are reasons why we're feeling that way. So the idea is that if we're only addressing these umbrella emotions, we're providing some sort of short-term fix for the problem because we're not addressing what's really going on. So for example, if you feel angry and you're only addressing that anger, so you yell at somebody, you break something, or you just keep it in and it turns into something else, that's not going to provide any long-term fix. So the idea is, okay, well, why do you feel angry? Do you feel let down? Do you feel betrayed? And if you do feel let down or you do feel betrayed, why get to the root of the problem? Why do you feel betrayed? Why do you feel let down? And the idea is that if we're able to address that root cause, that root emotion, it's going to provide long-term, I don't like to say fixes, but it's going to address a long-term problem. And one of the most important things to do when talking to your child or teen is to provide a safe space for them. And we kind of talked about providing a safe space for them before, but how do you do this? So one of the first things that you can do is validate their emotions, be able to communicate with them instead of becoming defensive or arguing with them. Don't take it personally. So lots of times they're going to say that they feel a certain way. We have to validate that, even if we might feel like they're being quote unquote over dramatic, or they are not appreciating something that you're doing. They're only looking at the negative. So we have to be able to validate and not take what they're saying personally. Accept that you're not going to be able to fix everything, and just listen to them. Sometimes people don't want advice. They want somebody to vent to. And it's important to know that your child or teen they're going to experience stressors in their lives. So being able to help them through those stressors and find good coping skills and feel like they have people that they can talk to is going to be really important, not just for the present situation, but for in the future. And listed below are going to be some different resources that you can use to kind of research these things yourself, and some different activities that you can try out with your teen to help build those connections to better understand them.